All right, welcome back to the Elias Macko Show and In Transit for this Wednesday. More than 70% of Canadian products travel on a truck at some point on their journey to you. A major new investigation now raising serious questions about what's happening behind the wheel at one of the country's most important industries, the trucking industry. A months-long investigation by the Globe and Mail found evidence of widespread labor abuse, wage theft, driver misclassification, weak enforcement, and safety concerns throughout Canada's trucking sector. Let's head over to one of the two journalists responsible for this piece. Sara Mojtehedzadeh is a reporter with the Globe and Mail's investigative team. Sara, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much.
And of course, you and your colleague Mahima doing this piece in the Globe and Mail. You two start off the piece telling the story of one long-haul truck driver, Raminderjeet Singh, who racked up 29,000 kilometers on the road. Tell our listeners why you begin with this truck driver's story.
Well, I think he really epitomizes a lot of the concerns about the industry and the frustrations that drivers have. So he worked for 2 months as a long haul trucker, his first real permanent job in the industry. And for those 2 months, he got paid $1,000, which works out to about 6 cents a mile or so, which is really nothing. He, like many truck drivers, was the victim of wage theft. But the federal government has ultimately only collected $122 of the $9,000 that his employer owes him.
How does this happen? How are there not, mechanisms in place, ways to ensure someone doesn't get paid 6 cents a kilometer? It seems incredible in a country like ours for this to happen.
Well, I think what I heard doing this investigation was that the complaints and enforcement system has really raised a lot of concerns, not just with truck drivers, but also, trucking firms who are playing by the rules. So trucking makes up the vast majority of wage theft complaints amongst federally regulated employers. But our investigation found that when Ottawa orders trucking firms to pay back their drivers, they're only successful in collecting that money, less than 20% of the money that is owed to drivers has actually been collected by the government. And only a handful of employers have actually been penalized for those infractions. So I think there's a lot of concern around whether the system is actually deterring bad actors.
But how do these drivers end up in these situations? Are they just not equipped to fight for themselves? Are they being taken advantage of? Like, take me through the process, because I'm sure some people will be listening to this and say, well, hold on a second. How do you even end up having that much wage theft without saying something?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's complicated, but part of the answer is that many drivers came here sort of with precarious immigration status, like either through the international student program, some come through the temporary foreign worker program. And so ability to kind of advocate yourself is difficult when your employment status might be tied to, or your immigration status might be tied to one trucking firm. You don't have permanent residency, and you may not be fully aware of the rules around workplace abuse. And so, one of the things that I sort of heard consistently was that the lack of enforcement has meant that these practices have become really normalized in the trucking sector. And then you combine that with a relatively vulnerable workforce, and you kind of have this pressure cooker situation where it becomes very difficult, to make sure it's an even playing field and that people's rights are being respected on the job.
One of the things that in your piece you highlight quite a bit is self-employed truckers. Let's talk a bit about that, right? Because for me, I'm thinking a lot about, okay, these are people who are working for companies and these companies are taking advantage of them. But what's the difference here with self-employed trucking workers?
Yeah, so obviously in the trucking industry, there are legitimately self-employed truckers who own their own truck and essentially operate kind of like a small business. But what our data found in this investigation was that there's been a massive rise in the number of truck drivers who are categorized as self-employed. And what critics are saying is that this can't possibly reflect a genuine increase in legitimate owner operators, because buying a big rig is expensive. Not a lot of people have the funds or the finances to run their own small business and operate in that way. And so what experts think it's an indicator of is this practice called employee misclassification, which involves a company hiring a driver and then falsely treating them like they're self-employed because those workers are not protected by federal labor laws. And so it saves the employer a lot of money to sort of pretend that these workers are not entitled to, the basic protections, to not pay employment insurance, pension payments, workers' compensation coverage. And it's a way essentially to slash your payroll costs. And so there's growing concerns that this model has become quite pervasive in trucking.
Is there a will from the federal government, those who are responsible, maybe provincial authorities as well? Is there a will to fix this?
I mean, we have seen some changes over the years. So in 2021, the federal government did explicitly ban employee misclassification. They've ramped up inspections, and most recently, they've actually changed some tax regulation essentially to apply greater scrutiny to the trucking sector, and make sure that trucking firms aren't evading taxes by this false self-employment model. Mm-hmm. But I think that the concern is that, like I said, the penalties are still pretty small and not particularly wide-ranging. And so, there's concerns that, again, it's not an effective deterrent, that we need more inspections, we need bigger fines, and we need better information sharing. Because the other thing that we're finding is that some companies are actually just shutting down and moving jurisdictions to evade scrutiny. And so part of the concern is that, our regulation efforts are not coordinated enough to catch those bad actors.
What are the consequences? And when I say that, maybe I mean the consequences for all of us, for all Canadians, when an industry seemingly has all of these bad actors.
Well, what we know through the academic research is that job uncertainty and low pay are linked to poor safety outcomes. We know, for example, in Ontario that road violations amongst commercial vehicles are starting to go up. There were 537 fatal collisions involving commercial vehicles between 2021 and 2023. And so I think the concern amongst trucking experts is that we know that the industry is getting more precarious, but we're not doing enough preventative safety inspections to ensure that doesn't lead to bad outcomes on the road. And so we actually found in our investigation that around 85% of the thousands of trucking firms we analyzed had never received an in-depth safety audit by their provincial transport regulator. And so I think that is raising concerns that we're not doing enough to tackle the safety piece of all of this, even though we know there's a relationship between poor working conditions and safety outcomes.
Sara, I'll direct all of our listeners to check out your piece. It's called The Big Rig on the Globe and Mail website, and you're actually hosting a Q&A. You're having a Q&A on the Globe and Mail website today at noon, correct?
That's right, yeah, and we'll answer all your questions there.
Great. Sara, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much.
That's Sara Mojtehedzadeh, a reporter on the Globe and Mail's investigative team.
An iHeartRadio experience. Jelly Roll, live in Quebec City at Festival d'été de Québec. Presented by Bell in collaboration with Coors Light. You ain't nothing but a liar. You could win VIP tickets for two for July 19th with flights, hotel, and $1,000 cash. I'm wide awake and I'm dreaming. Download iHeartRadio. Listen to CJAD 800 for 10 minutes and enter to win. Jelly Roll at FEQ. Every day you listen is another chance to win.